Traffic to Website Tutorial 9. How to make podcasts that your visitors want to hear. This is Vince Colosso here, and this Traffic to Website tutorial is all about podcasts. Podcasts are periodical audio communications sent to or posted for an audience to listen to and or download. Podcasts usually are weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly audio casts. Now, there are certain things that you need to have in order to have a podcast. First thing is confidence. It's the very first thing you need in order to create a podcast. If you have no confidence, how can you speak to a large audience that hears your voice? If you want to grow, realize that you've got to grow outside your comfort zone. If you're nervous about creating a podcast, simply create a few dummy podcasts that no one except you will hear. Then maybe you can let a friend or a family member listen to them later on. After getting their opinions and suggestions, you should have a bit more confidence in your ability. Gather tons of information about podcasts, then continue to practice and get more confidence. The key to overcoming fear is to do that thing that scares you. Now that you've done a few practice podcasts, you should have an increased level of confidence that you can use in future real podcasts. The next thing I want to talk to you about is to have something to say. If you want more confidence in your podcast, make sure that you're prepared and have something to say. Whatever your niche is, make sure that you have a lot of knowledge about whatever you're talking about. If you have the knowledge, you're halfway there. If you don't have anything to say, here's a tip. If you have a Gmail account, everyone who uses YouTube, FeedBurner, Google Analytics, etc. should have one. Then sign up for Google Alerts. Enter your keyword and receive all of the newest information in your niche. Niche or niche, whatever you want to call it. Set it for whenever you want updates. Any new information regarding your niche, your keyword, is sent to your inbox. Now that you've done all of the above, you're ready to start a podcast. So what do you do? What do you need in order to do the podcast? Check this out. You need free equipment. Here are 5 free tools you need to create your podcast. 1. Audacity. Now this is the software that you can download and record your podcast for free. You'll have to also download the Lane plugin in order to generate an MP3 version of your podcast in order to upload it onto the internet once you're finished. 2. The Levelator. Now this keeps the microphones even. Keeps your microphone levels even, I should say, and help make your podcast sound better. If you're an amateur, this is ideal. The pros don't necessarily use it as much. Now, if you want your podcast to sound great, and Levelator does this for you. FeedBurner. I mentioned this earlier. Google also owns this site, which burns an RSS feed for your website or blog. But it also has a podcast feature to it that burns a podcast-friendly feed and also keeps stats on everyone who subscribes to your feed, which is great information for your business. You'll know that you're getting more listeners. Number 4 is WordPress.com. WordPress.com is a free hosted blog that allows you to post your blog or podcast quite easily. If you have a self-hosted WordPress blog, you have even more functionality, and you can download and install the PodPress plugin to make your podcast really pop if you have a self-hosted WordPress.org blog. Now, archive.org, so you'll need hosting of your podcast files. Just like YouTube hosts your video files, well, archive.org does that for your podcast files. The best free host is archive.org. They want to host as much of the internet's information as possible, so let them host it. You can also convert your podcast to multiple file types such as WAV or MP3 or IFF file types. In addition to hosting it, they also give your podcast a free player that allows your blog visitors to see the player on your blog and play it, as well as download it free so that they can listen to it later. Just a great tool, archive.org. Number 6, ID software. Okay, I not only promised 5 free tools, but here's an extra one. Your podcast will be uploaded to different podcast directories when you're savvy enough, and it's a great idea to have an image for it. Now, it's similar to having a cover for an album. Download the free ID software and drag and drop your MP3 cover art and label your podcast. It's a great way to make your podcast even more attractive and sexy. A weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly podcast that's informative, free, and fun is a way to connect with your audience and bring more traffic to your website easily. Create a large audience of listeners today. Believe me, I listen to certain people's podcasts, and when they're consistent with it, I go to their site, and let's say they post a podcast once a week. I go there, download it, or listen to it, or both. I download it and listen to it later, depending on however I feel. And I'm really disappointed when they're not consistent. Like one guy I go to and I listen to his podcast. I go and download his podcast and listen to it later. And it's always available on Wednesday. And when it's not there on Wednesday, I'm a little disappointed. So be consistent with your listeners. They'll really appreciate it, especially if you're giving great stuff. That's when you create a trust system with your listeners. And remember, if people only buy from people that they know, like, and trust. If they can trust you to be consistent, believe me, if you're consistent, that's part of trust too. Believe me, they can eventually buy products from you as well. For even more traffic to website tutorials, be sure to visit traffictowebsiteblog.com and discover tons of tried and proven traffic generation methods.